Hello, welcome back to the Speakeasy. Today it's just me and you, and we are going to recap year 2 of homeschooling. Now, admittedly, we're going to homeschool through some of the summer, so it's not technically the end of the year, but it is the end of the school year for a lot of people. So I thought this was a good time to do this, and it's also, I know, the time of year when a lot of people are considering homeschooling or they've made the decision, but now the nerves start to set in. I will tell you, April, May of 2024, that fall was when we pulled the girls. I had so much anxiety. I actually thought I was ill at one point. I was so anxious because you're walking into the great unknown. And so I thought this would be helpful. I'm going to kind of recap our year, and then I had opened up a question box on my stories, and I'm going to answer the most reoccurring ones at the end. But I will tell you this with confidence, year 2 was so much better than year 1. I remember somebody telling me year 1 is survival, year 2 it starts to feel like real life, like you're actually doing it. And I think that is so accurate. There were honestly a lot of moments in year 1 that I wanted to kind of throw in the towel. I was like, this is actually too hard and we can't figure each other out, and I don't think we can do this. But I am so thankful that we pushed through, because year 2 has been so much better. Not without its hard stuff and its hard moments, but obviously this time of year people are asking like, how has it gone? And I always want to be honest, because I'm never going to be one to present the like Pollyanna version of really anything. And someone's like, it is really good. We really love it. It's really beautiful and it's really hard. But if I have learned anything in life, it's that you choose your hard, right? This is coming out, I think, like at the end of May. So let me tell you what I did not miss this year, last year, is Maycember. The 7 million things that you have to do this month for your kids' school, the different t-shirts and the different dress up days and all of the gifts, and send money for that and this performance and this award ceremony. Did not miss that at all. Now, I know there's some people that thrive in that and they love that. That is not my hard wiring, nor is it that of my family. And so I always come back to choose your hard. It is hard to send your kids to school. It is hard to send them away and have them come back kind of like dysregulated. It is hard to do homework after they've been at school all day. It's hard to keep up with teachers and paperwork and requirements and deal with other people's children and state requirements. All of that is hard. And there are hard things about homeschooling. It is sometimes hard to be with your kids all day. It is sometimes hard to not have time to yourself. It is hard to be the one in charge of your children's education. It is hard to step out of the system that, for a lot of us, I know there are plenty of people that were homeschooled that now homeschool, but for some of us, it is very difficult to step out of the system that raised you and do it completely differently. So if I had to recap year 1, that would be year 2, that it was really so much better than year 1, but still had its hard stuff. And we're going to get into that a little bit. I don't have it all figured out, and I don't think I ever will, because I have the blessing of having friends that have been, that are graduating 18-year-olds that have always homeschooled, and they're like, well, I don't have it all figured out. And so I am very wary of people that talk about homeschooling from that mindset of like, this is it, this is the way. You're never going to get that from me. So let's talk about what changed from year 1 to year 2. There's just the general, like, you've done this already. You've made it through 1 year. And so you kind of have your bearings a little bit. My situation's a little bit more, like, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more of an extreme change from year 1 to year 2. Because for most of year 1 of podcasting, homeschooling, for most of year 1 of homeschooling, I was also pretty much like a full-time news source online. And that takes an extraordinary amount of time. I did a whole podcast episode on that big transition, like life and work transition. It's episode 407, where I just talked about God really pulling me out of that. But I do think that contributes significantly to how hard year 1 was, is I had a lot of demand for my time and attention and energy, and homeschooling takes a lot of time and energy. and attention. And so that changed the game, if I'm honest, going from being glued to the headlines and, filtering through them and figuring out what I was going to share and creating significantly more content than I am now. And the content being much more controversial. So there being significantly more DMs and like just more demand. I mean, I'd be a liar if I said I don't have some regret that I didn't make that pivot sooner. But for the first half of our first year of homeschooling, a little bit more than half, Jeremy was working from home. And so he was super helpful. He's incredible. And so he was helping shoulder a lot of it. And so you hear in the episode that I referenced that when he went back to work in March, it was like, oh my gosh, something really has to change. And then that process really began. And so that was a massive change for us. And it, as a result, has made me honestly just like a lot less snippy and easily frustrated. It expanded my capacity a lot. And that's really kind of the name of the game with homeschooling. I'm learning is your capacity and your threshold and your ability to stay patient with your children. And that has never really been a strong suit of mine, but it's something that God is growing in me, both through changing my circumstances and also just through meeting me where I am and helping me change. I will say we pivoted a lot less this year, and I also think that that's kind of standard practice. I feel like in year one, I had a lot of time to research because we decided we wanted to homeschool, and then we had a whole year before we could actually pull them because we were in a school contract. And so I did all this research into curriculums and learning methods and styles and all this kind of stuff. And then we get into this curriculum and I'm like, nope, this is not a good fit. This is not meeting them where they are. This feels like school work and it's not clicking. And so we pivoted a few times with curriculum. I'm actually looking at a box of it that we didn't use that I need to find something to do with. And so I think that's really normal. Regardless if you did a ton of research or you did none, I think that first year you're figuring out how your child learns and how you best teach. And so we pivoted a ton, but there was only one thing that we made a switch up on this year, and I'll get into curriculum more because that was a really big question that you guys had at the end. But that I liked the way that felt. I know that pivoting is one of the benefits of homeschooling. It's one of the freedoms and flexibilities that you absolutely should take advantage of. But at the same time, it was really nice to have found some things that worked and stick with them. And I think we, along with that, really started to hit our stride on a rhythm. And I think that's like point one and point two combined helped that happen, where I really felt like a chicken with its head cut off a lot during year one because we were going from spending 8 hours apart almost every day to essentially none a lot of the time is a huge change. It was a lot of what I had anxiety about leading up to them coming home. And that takes time. And we're still figuring it out. There are still things about our day-to-day rhythms that when I'm in it, I'm like, I don't think this is the best, but it's working for right now. And I'm always kind of praying and looking and asking the Lord to speak into, like, do we need less of this or more of this? Do they need more time apart? All of those kinds of things. And so our rhythm got a lot better. Being together 24/7 got so much easier. And again, I think that's just practice and like getting reps in and getting used to it. I noticed that like by the time we got to around Christmas this year, that I don't actually like spending time apart. And that's been kind of in progress since we started homeschooling, where it went from feeling like I was drowning in my own children, like drinking out of a fire hydrant, to now I almost like can't get enough. Where last summer they went to 4 summer camps and VBSs, And at the end of the summer, they came to me and were like, that was too much. I don't want to do that much. And I genuinely didn't put them in that many to like get rid of them. It was more like, hey, we're home all year together. Like, is this the time for them to go out and do things? But we've just gotten so acclimated to being together and genuinely enjoy it for the most part. We definitely have days where I'm like, please get out of my face. But for the most part, we've now come to a place where we enjoy each other's company so much that they may not go to any camps this summer, which, gosh, if you could tell 5 year ago, Blake, that I might not believe you. We also, our homeschool community grew this year. There's a significant amount of people at homeschool at our church, and we've been able to make connections, and that's been really helpful. And that was something that came up. Honestly, everything that I'm talking about came up a ton in my question box, but I wanted to give like our recap really quick, and then I'm going to get into your questions. But there were a lot of questions about the impact that community has on homeschooling. And I know that there are people that homeschool kind of more in like an isolated sense. I have, friends that live kind of out in the middle of nowhere and they don't do a lot with other people. And I think it takes all kinds of kinds. But the more our homeschool community has grown, the easier it's gotten. Obviously for them and having something to do, but oh my gosh, there is just something about having friends that are in it that you can shoot a text to or sit around a table with and talk about the intricacies of homeschooling with, and they don't look at you like you're crazy, and they get it, and they'll say, like, they'll just be honest and tell you the hard ugly parts. Like, all we want to do is not feel crazy and alone. And so I do think that homeschooling and isolation can be really difficult. And so what didn't work in year 2 uh, would be me. I'm joking. But I definitely got on my stories multiple times over the last year and was like, I am the problem. My expectations, my experience in the education system, I think I want to break out of the system, but then I don't know how, so they end up just recreating it, and that doesn't work in the home, was the hardest part. Overestimating the importance of retention. I had this moment right before we took Christmas break where I had done it's 5th grade math that I'm doing with my oldest, which isn't algebra, but it's also not addition. And we had done this kind of complicated, sequence on a Monday, on a Monday. And then we went back to look at it on Wednesday, and she couldn't really remember how to do it. And I remember immediately kind of getting frustrated and then being smacked in the face with that I couldn't remember how to do it either. And that's like, learning isn't linear, and that learning to give them the grace that I am not great at extending to myself, such as it usually takes a couple of times for me to learn a hard lesson. Not a math problem, but like God teaching me how to surrender or slow down or be obedient or submit to my husband. How long it took, how much confirmation, how much practice, how many times the Lord had to sit me down and get my attention. And to me, like, the concept 100% applies with whatever we're learning, because those things, like learning those life lived lessons, like, there's motive behind that. Like, this is going to make my life better. It can be a little bit difficult to feel like long division is going to make your life better, And so when we had that moment where I'm thankful it didn't come out, but internally I had this moment of like, are you kidding me? We did an entire lesson on this. And then I'm looking at it going, I don't know how to do this either. And so we just went back and recovered it. And, so then you go down the spiral of, we're just going to talk about retention for a second. Like, you go down the spiral of like, am I doing a bad job? It's like, no, I'm following a really great curriculum. And there were so many things that both of them came home from school having been taught and not retained. But the class just keeps moving on. I will never forget one of our teachers, our last year, telling us she's getting dragged behind the cart. there's only so much a teacher can do about that. And that is the beauty of the homeschooling environment, is that we just went back and did it again. And you know what? It clicked that time. And with more and more practice, now it's second nature for her to do these problems in this way. But I was so freaked out about retention and thinking really unrealistically that the first time we covered something, they needed to grasp it and be able to execute it perfectly moving forward, was just an unrealistic expectation. That has become the reoccurring thing, that I had a lot of unrealistic expectations, both of them and of myself, and learning that their confidence is way more important than their speed, than their pace. That a lot of the, if I'm honest, a lot of the traditional school system had broken down a lot of both of their confidence, and that it is my job and my honor and like a blessing to get to help rebuild it while like moving them along the educational, spectrum. That if they think they can't do it, then they're not going to be able to. But if they are growing in their confidence, if they know that mom's going to meet them where they are, and that we can go over this as many times as we need to until they understand it, that's so much more important than them snapping along in their education. And that connecting with them is way more important to me than the curriculum. And I know that the naysayers listen to homeschoolers talk and they're like, your kids are going to be stupid. And they're not, because we do plenty and we cover a lot. But that, it's the same concept as connection before correction. Connection before curriculum, I think, is just as important. That when I can tell that my kid is all in her head and something's going on, it probably isn't even school related half the time, she's not going to hear a dang thing I'm saying. And that, again, it is like the blessing and honor of homeschooling to connect with her first, to understand where her heart is and where her head is and what's got her kind of sideways. And just an aside parenting thing, like a lot of the time, validate it. I can be a bit like a man in my mothering and try to fix it all. And that think about when you're super wigged out about something. Do you really want someone to tell you all the ways you're wrong and why it's actually not that big of a deal? Or do you want them to just listen to you and meet you where you are first? And then you're a lot more prone to hear reason. Again, I feel like a lot of the parenting stuff I'm learning in this season is just things that I know about connecting with adults and applying it to children. If my friend is losing her mind, I'm not going to come in with rationale, but I do it to my kids all the time. A lot of time because I just want the meltdown to stop, not start. And so connecting with them and seeing them and giving them space to be human before we get to the work has been huge. That has been massive for us. And so it really comes down, I said this in my stories the other day, it comes down to giving up the attempt to fit a square peg into a round hole. That we've broken out of the system, right? We're going a different way, we're doing a different thing, but how often am I trying to recreate the system in my house and expecting systematic results when we're doing it completely different? And I think that will probably be a years-long process that I hope gets better every year as we're in this for as long as we do it. That I think that just takes time. I think it takes effort. I think you have to be applying yourself to the essentially deconstruction of the system that's ingrained in you. But you also have to give yourself grace and give yourself time as it comes undone. So, the number one question in my question box was about scheduling. How do you do it? How do you get it done? And I want to back up to what I talked about before, that this homeschooling was significantly more difficult when there was a higher demand on my time. There were a lot of people that were like, how do you balance working from home and doing this? Well, it was really hard when I was working, I think probably averaging, it's hard to add up because it would be so like spaced through the day. But when we look back on the amount of content I was making and the amount of time I was putting it together, it was like 6 to 7 hours a day. I felt like I had to like push to get us through school and didn't have a lot of time to connect with them, and then had to shift gears into working. And it was really hard. Is it doable? 100%. Do I want to go back to doing it that way? Not necessarily. Also, I should have said this at the top of the episode. It takes all kinds of kinds. You're not me. You don't have my hardwiring or my disposition. And I do feel like a lot of people on the internet have a tendency to take in information and think that I'm like telling you about your life. I'm telling you about mine and sharing what works for us. And so if you work a full-time job and you homeschool, I know people that do that and it works for them. And I just can't speak to that necessarily because it didn't work super great for us. I did not enjoy that experience. Now, another big part of that was like giving up your time alone. That was incredibly difficult for me. Like I said earlier, going from 8 hours a day apart to 0. There were, in year one, there was a lot of time spent kind of like rocking back and forth in my closet, just like, oh man, I've bitten off more than I could chew. And probably just that they were acclimating to not being like constantly entertained by their peers or by a teacher and kind of expecting that to fall on me. And I had the same expectation of myself. And thankfully, that is something that God's really broken off, I would say, in the last year, is the idea of boredom being okay and that it is not my job. Like, it is my job to connect with them and see them and love them and guide them towards Jesus and educate them. It is not my job to entertain them. We have an entire cabinet full of every craft supply you could possibly imagine. Go ham. You own more Legos and Barbies than probably you need to. Go ham. Those have really become mantras or things that I say to them quite a bit, because in the beginning I thought that I had to like keep them entertained while trying to keep all of those other plates spinning. And it's a wonder that I wasn't that or that I was it's not a wonder that I was so kind of strung out. And so letting your kids be, letting them go do their own thing, having a daily quiet time. My homeschool mom friends and I were talking about this the other day, the implementation of like an hour in your room. You don't have to go to sleep, but just go be still. This is one of those homeschool benefits that I don't think we take advantage of enough. And so I'll give you the run through of what our days traditionally look like. I get up at 6 so that I have a full hour to myself before the girls get up. They are not allowed to come out of their rooms before 7 unless there is blood barf or somebody at the door, is typically like there's something awry. And so I have that hour to like spend with the Lord, get my head around the day. Typically from 7 to like 9, we make breakfast, we pick up the kitchen, we get dressed for the day, and they go outside for usually at minimum 20 minutes. Sometimes it's more like 30. And they also, again, a necessary caveat, I have a 9 and 11-year-old. I don't have littles. I've never homeschooled littles. So I unfortunately can't. There were some questions in the question box about that. I unfortunately can't help there because I have no experience. My youngest child was 7 and school aged when we started homeschooling. But they will rollerblade, they'll ride their bikes, they'll play with chalk, they'll do all of the things that you want your kids to do outside. And I will like tidy up the house. I will get like school set up, so like get curriculums pulled out, look through everything, because we do use open and closed curriculums, which I'm going to talk about curriculum in a second. And then by 9:15 we start school. And we typically do school from 9:15 to about 12:30, 1 o'clock. Hack, side note, if you have a brick, I had no idea until this last weekend that you can actually brick text messages on your phone. Like you can't see them, they can't come through. I just started doing this. We also have a landline now. So if there's an emergency, like my dad or my husband can call us. Otherwise, I am unavailable for a couple of hours the days that we do school, and it has made such a difference because I used to brick, social media, news apps, email, like the apps I use for work, and that was really great. But man, I unbricked on Monday and I had 40 text messages. That is 40 opportunities for distraction that no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I would still know that they were there and be like have some mental energy siphoned off to that. 10 out of 10. Cannot recommend. I actually set up a schedule. So now at 9:15, my phone bricks and it just shuts out. It just becomes like a really expensive, I don't know, piece of matter that doesn't really do anything. Anyway, in that time, typically my youngest and I do English first. And then when we're done, she has free play time. During that, my oldest is typically listening to an audiobook while she does some of her chores. Because if you know an 11-year-old, they are perpetually cleaning their room because it's just always a wreck. Then we swap. Youngest has free play time. Oldest and I do English. And then we typically take a little break and grab snacks and water and kind of like get some movement and wiggles, and we'll listen to music or something. Not very long, like 10 minutes. And then the youngest and I sit down for math again. And while we do that, the oldest has some free time. She typically does some kind of art. She's usually pulling out her big, thick pad and like drawing or creating in some form. And she'll sit at the table with us, but I'm constantly going, you cannot be distracting. And then we swap, and the oldest and I do math. And then we rotate science, math, and art in at the end of that. And we do that all together. We do that like round table style. We're all learning together at the same time. Now, quick side note about attention spans. Something that had not occurred to me at all until this year, that your attention span grows as you get older. And I was expecting my youngest to have the same length attention span as her sister. And it was making things very difficult for us because she would get to the 20-25 minute mark and she would start to peter out, and then I would get frustrated. And so I ended up doing a bit of a deep dive, which I recommend. Do a deep dive into the attention spans of your children's ages, and you actually may be shocked by how short they are. For a 9-year-old, it's about 20 to 25 minutes. And so now what we have started doing, we started this I kind of went down that rabbit hole like last summer. I set a timer for her specifically. My oldest, her attention span is about the time it typically takes us to do a lesson, more like 40-ish minutes. And so I don't really need a timer for her, but for Elliot, I set a timer for 25 minutes. And when it's done, we're done, even if we haven't finished the lesson, because she is done. And I have experienced entirely too many times the byproduct of continuing to push at this age, and it's not fun and nothing gets learned and everybody's mad. So that would be one big tip, is like look into attention spans. Now, curriculums. I have forever, like since we first decided to homeschool, been hesitant on sharing curriculum recommendations. First of all, people are wildly opinionated and they will tell you all of the reasons you're wrong for using the curriculum that you're using, even though you know your kids and they don't. But secondly, I've also been in the boat of trying to find a curriculum and been so overwhelmed by all of the recommendations and all of everybody's different opinions. But even with those qualifiers, I will go ahead and tell you what we're using. But I want you to understand that everybody is so different and your kid learns different than mine do and you teach differently than I do. And so what works for us probably like it may not be a fit for you, but it also might. And I understand that I'm so thankful to be in a position where I've built a lot of trust with a lot of you and that a lot of us are really similar. And so I will tell you that if I could go back to year one and start with the good and the beautiful, oh my gosh, I would love to be able to do that for most things. They both use the good and the beautiful for English language arts. My youngest also uses it for math. My oldest uses math with confidence for math. We just love it. There are entire YouTube videos of people waxing poetic about why they love the good and the beautiful, and I probably agree with all of it. I love that it is so comprehensive. I love that it's open and close. I love that it's spiral where like you come back around to these concepts over and over, hence the conversation we just had about retention. But I also do really like math with confidence. It's very direct and to the point and kind of like bullet points. It feels like it's more mastery based than spiral, and that works really well for my oldest. We just started Tuttle Twins history. Love it. My kids are obsessed with the show that's on Angel, and so that was just an easy win with them. They think it's the coolest thing that this TV show is also a curriculum, and they've learned a ton about history and the government via the TV show that we like have touched on in the curriculum. The reality is there's just a lot of people talking about health insurance, whether you are self-employed or you have a huge premium. It's just become a conversation that a lot of people are having. And we're finding ourselves asking, what am I paying for? Why am I paying this much and feeling like I can't do things that actually help me get healthy? And that is where something like Crowd Health comes in. With Crowd Health, you pay a monthly fee, and that gives you access to a team of bill negotiators, lower cost prescriptions and labs, a list of vetted doctors. And if something serious happens, you pay the first $500 and the crowd steps in and covers the rest, which really isn't that how community was meant to work? So you can join Crowd Health to get started for $99 for your first 3 months by using the code SPEAKEASY when you go to joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code SPEAKEASY. Remember, this is not health insurance, but this is how you can opt out of a broken system and take back your power at joincrowdhealth.com. It is also the greatest story ever told, but it's called The Biggest Story. And they have like actual book curriculum. It's very repetitive. I find I cut a ton of it. So we watch the YouTube videos and then go over some of the questions that are in the curriculum. But I think if you just are paying attention and have some kind of like general knowledge and capacity to Google, you could build out your own conversation just off of the YouTube video. The YouTube videos are beautiful. They're like really beautifully animated. They're very engaging and my kids really enjoy them. And we just went through the stories of Genesis and Exodus and they loved it. So those are my curriculums that we are using. But you got to figure out what works for you. You know what I mean? Okay, another big thing that came up in the question box was the fear of being behind, which I almost just skipped and was like, this came up a lot, but I'm going to pretend like it didn't because this has been a really big thing for me in our homeschooling journey. And it's really vulnerable, and people on the internet are mean and they're judgmental. But I am determined to not let that make me calloused. It has made me selective about what I'll share and more private, but I'm not going to let that make me not talk about things that people are also struggling with. Another thing that came up in the question box a ton was how to get your husband on board. And lucky for you, Jeremy and I actually sat down and did an entire podcast episode on this right when we started our homeschool journey. It was episode 294 because he was very much not on board. And his not on boardness is why we didn't homeschool sooner than we did. Also, it was God, and God was like preparing our hearts and preparing our family. And he used my husband's hesitation to, build in the margin to do that. But lots of conversations, lots of submission, lots of really feeling convicted that this was the right thing for our kids, but even more so being convicted that I didn't want to nag him into it. And I'm really thankful for that, that he came around really on his own. And so we tell that whole story. He shares all of what his concerns were and how he came around on them in that episode. It's a great listen. And then anytime you open the door for people to ask questions about homeschooling, there's going to be questions about socialization. And these are my thoughts on socialization. And this may be like the part that steps on some toes, but I'm okay with that. I personally, it's just me, I don't know that I really I don't think I ever subscribed to the belief that the optimal socialization situation for my children is to be in a classroom with a group of children that are their age, trying to sit still for as long as they can with brief periods outside moving. That part of it is all like the school that part of the school thing has always been kind of hard for me because I want my kids to know how to deal with kids that are younger than them. I want them to know how to deal with kids that are older than them. I want them to know how to talk to adults. I want them, you know, it was so funny when we started homeschooling, there were definitely the people that were like, well, how are they going to work a real job? I'm like, but what do you mean you mean, how are they going to deal with going to sit in an office? I don't know. Maybe they won't. Maybe they will. But I think that they're going to be prepared for that either way, you know? And so my children are so well socialized. Also, you'll hear a lot of homeschoolers say, I think we're sometimes more busy homeschooling than we were with school, like going to regular school, the amount of play dates and co-op and extracurriculars that we now have the time for. That was a concern of my husband's, and we get into it in that episode that I mentioned. It was never a concern for me. Partially because I know my kids. Now, I think like if your kids struggle with socialization, then maybe I don't know, they still could benefit. I think they maybe could benefit because of the way like they could benefit from homeschooling because of the way that they are being socialized maybe isn't like the best setting for them. But now we do life with people where my kids are with babies to teenagers and everything in between. And I've gotten to watch my kids really thrive. Like my kids are thriving in homeschooling. And believe it or not, like if they are asked about homeschooling, they will tell you that they love it. And so I think that I almost feel like the socialization thing is like this fear mongering thing. It's something that people hold on to. Well, what about socialization? Well, what about it? Because my kid was also dealing with bullies and mean kids daily when they were going to school. Is that the socialization that you mean? So I think that again, like it's just readjusting your mindset about it and having a different outlook, which is really that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing with homeschooling. And it's something that I am still in process in and probably will be for this entire process, but that is the recap of year 2. I am super excited about year 3. I just think we're going to continue to get our feet under us more and more. And I think that as time is a really good friend in homeschooling. And as more time passes, we all acclimate and we all understand each other better. And my girls are getting older and they have more capacity for independence and for understanding and for hard conversations. And I am just forever so pumped to have a front row seat to all of that. So, love you.